We've got a final Arctic blast on the way behind our little snowstorm that's moved through the Midwest and Northeast, but then it changes on the way with warmer air, and it's going to come with stormy conditions over parts of the central and eastern U.S., as well as along the immediate west coast. I'll cover all the details on everything you need to know from that Arctic blast and pattern flip to the flooding risk that we'll have in the USA's midsection, all that in this video. Alright, we'll get into the content in just a second. Timestamps are in the description, but please hit that subscribe button if you enjoy the rest of this video. I do accurate, easy to understand, and passionate forecasting. Now let's look at the feels like temperature over the next several days with the European model. First of all here, filming this on your Friday evening. As we go into our Saturday morning, we've got a big swath of negative wind chills over the north central United States, as well as including parts of the Midwest and Great Lakes. Of course, wind chill alerts have been out throughout the week for these wind chills, and they continue here into the weekend over that area, but just very cold over pretty much the eastern half of the country, even as we move forward through the rest of this weekend. We see some at trouble spots as we go into Sunday morning as well through Appalachia, back through the Midwest and the upper Midwest and Great Lakes, and then into the interior Northeast. It's going to be very cold weekend, especially during the morning hours, as even during the afternoon over the north central plains, that's where we'll struggle to get out of those negative wind chills. That's as the jet stream does a little maneuver like this, where we've got that dip going all the way on down to the Gulf Coast. I mean, even places like New Orleans, Louisiana, dropping down with those wind chills, below 20 at times throughout this event. So very cold wind chills there. You can see as we go towards our Monday morning, we begin to see this recede a little bit. Parts of the interior Northeast, as well as back on over to the upper Midwest, still seeing some relatively cold wind chills near zero or a little bit below. But as we go towards, say, the afternoon on your Monday, we warm up decently. And then Tuesday morning with some warmer air kind of ejecting on out into the plains, that's really going to help to, kind of push our jet stream and those colder temperatures further northward. And these seasonable, 20s and 30s for wind chills in the morning are really going to spread on in. In fact, temperatures are going to be warmer than average as we head towards the middle to back half of next week for many of us. As you can see, look at this waking up Wednesday morning of next week with 50s and 60s in areas that have seen teens and 20s even below for wind chills there in the south. Just a little bit cool with some teens and 20s, our coldest wind chills in the country in the mid part of next week over the north central. Again, here's those 850 millibar temperature anomalies. These are temperatures just above our heads here by several thousand feet. But you can see cold air sinking into the southeast. This is our final wave of that Arctic blast here into this weekend. But again, we've got kind of this warmer air mass to the west of it that's kind of going to build back on in. And you can see how that's going to really pick on up as we make our way into next week. Slowly drifting on up, we see the cold air degrade over the southeast. Still a little bit cold on the, a little bit colder than average there in the southeast as we head towards the early to mid part of next week. But over the central U.S., that's where you're really going to start to notice the effects of this ridging that's going to start to build into parts of southern Canada with that El Nino effect kind of going back into play here, of course. And, with El Nino being as strong as it is there in the eastern Pacific, it's pretty typical to get this blocking high over parts of southern Canada, the upper Great Lakes region. That, sure enough, comes into play by the Tuesday part of next week. Even parts of the southeast begin to warm back on up closer to average for this time of the year. And you can notice that's really going to bring up that warmer air and moisture over the plains as well. All of this really going to help to bring in that new pattern, which will bring in a storm system, and we'll look at that momentarily. But look at how we warm up over pretty much the entirety of the country by Wednesday. It's going to be really warm out there in comparison to average, with a pretty big late January thaw at that. You can see pretty much the entire country at or above average in that temperature probability outlook from the Climate Prediction Center. This goes 6 to 10 days out, so 25th through the 29th here. And you can see especially through parts of the upper Midwest, Ohio Valley, and the Southeast. That's where it's going to be well above average. Now let's get into that precipitation type and rate graphic here from the European model. Key is at the bottom so you know what type of precipitation you're looking at. Of course, we've had that snow event move through the Midwest, Great Lakes, as well as parts of New England. We've still got the lake effect snow going on behind that there into Michigan, as well as parts of western New York. But overall high pressure taking over temporarily, that Arctic high, the final one, right, over parts of the eastern U.S. But remember, we've got warmer air starting to build into the west. That's as we get the southerly, kind of southwesterly pushing into parts of the west coast, bringing some heavier rainfall and even some snowfall there to parts of the Sierras. The Cascades as well, getting in on some heavier snowfall as well at times as we make our way through the weekend, as that kind of atmospheric river-like pattern continues. A little bit of snow and light rain moves into parts of the four corners out of that, but you can see we'll continue to see the rainfall hit parts of the western Washington coastline there, western Oregon, as well as parts of northwest California getting hit, while that high pressure, that colder high pressure, continues in the east. But eventually, where we start to warm things back up, remember early week is when we start to warm things back up, and that really starts here as we go into our Monday over the plains, and that that is where we're going to get some warmer air to kind of advect there over parts of the south central plains, and that's where we also get the chance for some at least brief freezing rain, where we still have enough cold air in place there over Oklahoma, northern Arkansas, as well as southern Missouri. This could add up, but it'll be pretty much followed by heavier rainfall that's going to push through parts of eastern Texas initially Monday morning, then kind of lift on up to the northeast. You can see that kind of fill on in, and it will be quite heavy at times through parts of the Dallas Metroplex, Fort Worth, southeast of town to Tyler, Texas, down to Houston as well. That's a heavier pocket of rain there over the south central plains as well as the southern Midwest. Of course, still raining at times through our Monday afternoon back over through the Pacific Northwest as well as the West Coast. Again, the leading edge of this next system here, of course, over parts of the plains, continuing to kind of make its way on up into parts of the Midwest and the Great Lakes. We'll have to watch for some wintry weather through parts of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, as well as Michigan out of this. But overall, it's going to be mainly a rain event with that warmer air lifting northward. So through the parts of the mid and lower Mississippi River Valley through our Tuesday, that's where we'll notice the rain prominent there. That system kind of breaks up into our midweek, though we'll kind of watch the pieces that are still left of it over the eastern U.S. And some of that could include some snow over the Great Lakes and interior Northeast. And then you can also see a new system looking like it's going to try and get its act together. Of course, another one of those that came out of the west. And by the time we make our way into our Wednesday morning, even towards Wednesday mid to late morning and into the afternoon, we'll kind of have a overall messier pattern. But as we will have already had that first system move through, now we've got another round of heavy rain here over the Arklatex, all these areas in the lower Mississippi River Valley as well, needing to monitor the potential not only for some thunderstorms that could be on the stronger side out of that next system, but also the potential for some flooding, especially out of that round. But of course, you could get flooding even earlier out of that first system. It just looks like the threat will continue to rise system by system here as we go through time. And this is why we're going to have a lot of moisture that's going to be lifting north out of the Gulf of Mexico. You can see here as we go from our Saturday and into our Sunday early morning, we've got the jet stream like this, a lot of dry air over parts of the eastern U.S. The only places really with some moisture, those greens and blues indicating pretty decent moisture there along the west coast. This is that precipitable water there with the European model. But notice how over the plains here we're really going to begin to see and that warmer air lift northward, that more moist air lift northward. Here's that first system. Again, it's looking like it'll get a decent moisture pull, especially on up through southeast Texas, southern Oklahoma, Arkansas, as well as Louisiana. So I think that's where our focal point for the heavier rain and flood threat is going to get going out of this system as we go Monday and into our Tuesday. But again, pieces of that system moving on up into the Midwest Great Lakes. So not only do we have to watch for wintering weather, but also as that rain moves in, maybe the potential for some isolated flooding up there as well. You can really see how just that warmer and more moist air mass is going to fill in over the southeast U.S. by the time we go to Tuesday of next week. And then look, here comes the moisture with that next system. Since it's right on the heels of our first one, you can see how it's able to kind of pull up even more moisture. So southeast Texas all the way on over through the Gulf Coast states. Over this entirety of this region, it's pretty moist. Just a lot of moisture pushing on, especially with that second system, it looks like right now. So we'll be watching both for thunderstorms and flooding, and it may be a low to moderate end risk for some flooding out of that first system. But our second system does look like it will be able to kind of bring those threats back, and maybe even in a stronger fashion. Here's our precipitation out of system number 1. You can see we've got a lot of heavy rain on the way, really out of parts of the plains, heading on up into the Midwest. Heaviest totals here are going to be over parts of southeast Texas, it looks like right now, with maybe 2+ inches of rain possible. Same deal on the west coast, even parts of southern Arizona. The lower elevations, of course, picking up at least 2 to 4 inches of rain in the west. And then as we continue to move this forward, you can see that system Wednesday onward there over the southeast really adds to those totals here. So if you live from southeast Texas on over in this zone I'm circling into parts of the mid-south, even on over to Appalachia, I'd be watching the potential for locally higher totals. I think somewhere in the southeast next week, whether it's in eastern Texas all the way over to the Carolinas, somewhere, especially there along that Gulf Coast, could see maybe 6 inches of rain, and the same goes there along that immediate west coast out of the systems that are on the way. But here's our 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook. You can see it's looking quite wet, continuing in that 6 to 10 day range, which is again the 25th to the 29th here of January there over the south central as well as the southeast. And this doesn't even include those near-term systems, so really looking like it's going to maintain that wetter pattern. Same deal goes back on over there into the far northwest. It's a little bit wetter than average, although it looks like southwest California gets a little bit of a reprieve. But here's your forecast ice accretion from the European model. Of course, can't forget about the wintry side to those systems, especially that first one, it looks like. So Monday going into our Tuesday of next week. From eastern Oklahoma All the way on up into parts of the Great Lakes. I've monitored the potential for at least a glaze of ice, but some higher amounts, maybe closer to a quarter to a half an inch of ice, and that would be enough to cause some pretty dangerous impacts, slick roadways, power outages, tree limbs coming down, from the weight of that ice. Now here we go again. We've got the system departing out of the northeast right now. As I filmed this video, brought some decent accumulation there, especially lake effect in far northern Indiana, as well as off of Erie and Ontario. Also have some snow in the near term there into the Mountain West. Are we getting any snow on the northern end of these systems throughout this week? Not really looking like much, but again, you can see kind of a little bit adding on up there in parts of Wisconsin. This whole region needs to be kind of in question over whether they will get snow this week, but I don't really think the chance is high for extreme accumulation. Maybe some light to moderate events on the northern end of whatever systems can get going here. Best bet for the heavier snowfall accumulations back into the Cascades, the Sierra Nevada range, up here into parts of eastern Washington and northern Idaho, as well as on through parts of the Four Corners and the higher elevations there. Spots picking up locally more than a foot in the higher terrain, but even into places like Denver, just west of you, mountains picking up at least 6 inches of snow. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit that subscribe button. That's it for this one. I'll be back with you soon.